All right, welcome back. This is Rob again, and if you didn't watch part one, click in the description to watch part one. This is part two of a dust boot, making a dust boot in Fusion 360 for your CNC router. We are going to finish this up in this video, and then in part three, we will create the toolpaths, and then in part four, we will cut it out, put it together, and test it out. So we are at this part here. If you're not here, go watch part one. Welcome back. Now what we want to do is we want to offset this whole outside edge here. So we're going to press O on our keyboard for offset. And we're going to click that outside section there. And we're going to move it in. Our gap was 0.75, right? So if that takes us all the way to the inner circle there. We don't want it to go that whole distance. We want to just do times, we want 3 walls here, 3 even sections. So times 1 divided by 3 for 1/3. There we go. So that'll move it in 1/4 of an inch. So the reason we had to draw new circles for our router, for our original line out here to trim, is because we can't offset and offset. If I press O to offset this, I can't because it is an offset. So I have to offset the original image again, or the original outside edge again. And now I want to move it in. I know it's going to be actually minus 0.5. That's exactly how much I want to move it in. But you could do minus 0.75 divided by 2/3. Actually, it should be times 2/3, right? Yeah, there we go. Or you could just leave it at 0.5, and that works too. And these look like something here. That's just the dimension there, just so you know. That's just telling me how big that circle is. So if I put that vertical, that'll be pretty good. You won't see those anymore. Okay, that looks good. So now what we want to do is we want to add some tabs. And the reason we're going to add these tabs is so we can clamp down. We're going to cut through it at the end with something like a table saw or a bandsaw. And that way we have a little bit of leverage. We can put a bolt through and clamp down on our router. So let's go ahead and draw a line. Let's press L for line. Start on our circle there. Drag it out, whatever you want. I'm going to drag it out 1 inch. And I'm not going to mark it anywhere in particular. I'm just going to leave it looking really, really lousy like that so I can show you how to fix it. That looks awful. I want all of these lines to be 1 inch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to this constraint and I'm going to find the equal constraint, this one right here. I want this line to be equal to that line. And then I want this line also to be equal to that line. And now they're all 1 inch. And that's perfect. But it still looks really, really lousy, right? So let's make this line here. I'm going to just select it first. You could select your constraint first and then click it. But I'm going to make this one vertical. So I'm just going to click it and then click the horizontal vertical one. Okay, now that one's horizontal vertical. Perfect. I can make this line horizontal, or I can make it perpendicular with that constraint. And I can make it perpendicular to that one. And I can either make this one perpendicular to that one, or I can make it parallel. So I'm going to make this one parallel just to show off something else. So I want to make this line parallel to that line. And there we go. We're fully locked in place. We're defined. We're all black around the edges. Let's draw one more on this side, just so it has the ability to kind of seesaw, but I can still throw a bolt in there, and I'll explain that in a second too. So I'm going to press L to start a line. I'm going to drag out 1 inch. I'm going to make sure I just keep that constraint. Actually, you know, I'm going to make sure I'm going to draw it from up here because it looked a little close. So if I draw from here 1 inch out, it's horizontal. If I draw another line 1 inch down, and it's vertical or perpendicular, that's what that line was. It was perpendicular. It was a 90-degree angle to that other one. And then I try to draw a line 90 degrees from that perpendicular to that. It's not going to line up right. It actually wants to also snap to the midpoint there. That's what that triangle is. That's midpoint. We're not going to use that. But if I just drag it out to the center there, or I'm just going to drag it out to here, it doesn't matter. Now I'll just go ahead and make that one horizontal vertical. This line is not the same length as that line though, and they're not. I can still move it up and down. That's what that means. That's all that means. I can move it up and down. So I can do a couple other things. I can try to make these equal distance. I can make this equal to that to make it even like I did over here. But another constraint I want to show you is collinear. So if I click collinear, and then that line is selected, and I select what I want to make it on the same line as, that's what collinear is. I click that line. Now they're on the same line. And there we go. That looks good. We're pretty much done with our sketch. So now let's press Q on our keyboard for press, pull, or extrude. That's the one that doesn't make sense to me. Everything else is T for trim, C for circle, R for rectangle, L for line, Q for press, pull, or extrude. Doesn't make sense. But Q, press, pull, extrude. We're going to click the tab, this one here, this one, and that one. We're going to leave this inside one. And that's for the bristles of our kind of our broom. That's going to be the bristles there. So we have to put that in there, but we have to have a wall there. So that's what these are. We have an inside wall and an outside wall. How tall do we want to make this? We want to make this the full thickness of our material. So we're just going to call it thick. There we go. Now I have two separate things. These aren't connected. There's nothing holding them together. So let's go back into sketches by hitting that arrow there to bring it down. You'll notice it's invisible right now. We can either bring it back on or keep it invisible. I'm going to keep it invisible. Just double click to get back into your sketch. Press Q to press, pull, or extrude one more time. And we're going to select that inner edge. And now we don't want to extrude it to full thickness because that would be too much. That would make it even with the other one. It would just make it one big object. We want to make it, we want to recess our bristles in. And we want to recess them maybe about 80% of the thickness there. So I want to make this thickness only about 20% thick, so the rest of the 80% is air for the bristles to fit in. So let's do thickness times 0.2. There we go. Now let's turn sketches off again. Now we have three bodies, our inner edge, or outer edge, our inner edge, and then our center spot there. So this looks pretty good, and we could call it here, but I'm not really happy with the squared edges here. So I'm going to press F for fillet. And yes, it's fillet, not fillet. And I'm going to click that line. I'm going to click that line there. I'm going to select that line, that one there, and the ones on the other side as well. And we can select through our image, as you're seeing me do right now. And so what fillet is going to do is it's going to allow us to cut it and kind of give it a radius. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a 1/4 inch round there. And now that looks a lot smoother to me. I'm pretty happy with that. That's good. And the reason we did these tabs, by the way, now I can kind of tell you that, is so if I had cut right through the middle there, it's going to leave a little bit of a gap, and that gap is going to be equal to the thickness of whatever I'm cutting with. So if I'm using my bandsaw, it's going to be a 1/16 of an inch. If I'm using my table saw, it's going to be an 1/8 of an inch. And that way I can clamp down and make the circle a little bit tighter. I can make the whole outside diameter, or the whole outside circumference there, a 1/16 of an inch smaller. And that'll allow me to clamp down some pressure on my router. And I'm going to do it on both sides, and you don't want to clamp down on both sides, because if you do, you'll end up putting a lot of pressure on this and torque it and cracking it here. So if it comes down here, it's going to come up here. But I just like to put one on both sides so I can have a clamp on both sides. I don't know why. That's just how I'm doing it. So that's what this looks like, and it's done. And we can go ahead and we can start to manufacture it, which we'll do in part 3. But before we move on to part 3, since I have a little bit of extra time, let's go into change parameters, and I'll show you that we can adjust our units here. So let's say my router is actually 3 inches. It adjusts on the fly. Let's say my vacuum hose is, I have a smaller vacuum, 2-inch vacuum. Let's say my thickness is 0.75. Everything changes around it. I'm going to put it back to what I have it at, though. I'll make this, what was it, 2 1/4. And this was 2.717. There we go. All right, I'll see you in part 3 when we go ahead and manufacture it.